You're watching ABC7 News at 7.
Bill Nelson's a sore loser. We've won. We have had to win this election twice now. I will be going to Washington as the next U.S. Senator from Florida.
Rick Scott isn't interested in making sure every lawful vote is counted. He's using his power as governor to try to undermine the voting process.
Governor Rick Scott versus Senator Bill Nelson, Ron DeSantis versus Andrew Gillum, and Matt Caldwell versus Nikki Fried. 3 Florida races all facing recounts. Why are there so many recounts in Florida? Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Cohen, and welcome to ABC 7 at 7. Almost a week after Election Day, from Broward to Palm Beach, from Manatee to the Panhandle, they are recounting ballots in 3 razor-thin races: governor, U.S. Senate, and agriculture. And there are hiccups, and it's a fair question to ask. Why does it keep happening here? Is it because Florida is split right down the middle, or we just don't know how to count well, or both? There's perhaps no better person to have perspective on this than Sarasota's own Katherine Harris, who was Florida's Secretary of State in 2000 and oversaw Bush versus Gore, the great Florida recount. Former Secretary, thank you so much for joining us, and also Congresswoman. So what about it? Why does it keep on happening here? Is it because we're such a closely divided state, or has there been systematic problems that have never been solved?
It's deja vu all over again, like Rodney Dangerfield would say. Florida's a purple state. We're going to have a close election. We do have close elections, as you've seen in history. And it's not a constitutional crisis, it's a close race. And thankfully, we have some of the best election laws in the nation to address this. And so that's where we start.
Well, they've been, there's been a lot of discussion that after 2000, we changed our election laws to try to avoid some of the court cases that we saw back in 2000, which you were very familiar of. But we still have a situation here where in Broward County there are issues in terms of the design of the ballot and so forth. And I guess what a lot of folks might be wondering is, why haven't we resolved that? Why isn't there any kind of uniformity in terms of how they design a ballot in Broward County and Sarasota County?
Okay, a little history, a little perspective. We have resolved that. The rule of law is the most critical, the bedrock principle of our nation, and we have to make sure that one follows the law. Secondly, after the recount, even before that, as a senator, I had proposed election reform legislation, and there was no political will to pass it. Certainly after election 2000, we got that bill passed, in addition to many, many other things, and it was heralded nationally as the model for election reform. I went and testified before Congress, and they all applauded it. Then you fast forward over the years, that it has been overhauled, so the election laws are sufficient to address this. We're talking about the law, but elected officials have to follow the law. Now, you and I were just discussing elections and being elected and what that means. We, at the very basic expectation, we expect our elected officials to have integrity and courage to follow the law, because no matter what you do in a situation like this, half of the country or half of the state is not going to be pleased. So at least following the law is your only safe harbor, at least that's what I felt like. And so at this point, for Broward and Palm Beach, they have come to issue before. What your listenership, your viewership should understand is that the supervisors of elections in each of the 67 counties are independently elected by each county. And because of that, they have autonomy there. They are constitutional officers. The Secretary of State does not have the authority over them, as it would be in other employees under the Department of State. Consequently, they have the sole autonomy over designing ballots. If you recall, Teresa Lepore and the butterfly ballot, that was very confusing. And now they're saying that the setup for these are confusing. They're constitutional officers. They have that opportunity. So should we address that? Are there best practices? Yes, indeed, there are.
That's the question. So we could understand that the supervisors of elections are independent of each other, but when we're talking about a ballot designed to avoid confusion, that like we saw in 2000 or that we saw in Broward County now, why can't the state weigh in and bring some kind of best practices, as you mentioned, or uniformity to the process?
Well, they certainly have that across the nation. They have best practices. They have best practices throughout the state. It's still up to the supervisor of elections to observe those. I think more importantly, you can't legislate integrity, and you can't legislate competence. These are issues that voters determine. And so we'll see as this moves forward. There have been issues in the past. I can't speak to those because I wasn't part of the case. But it's very disconcerting that the laws are not being observed. The reporting procedures did not occur as they were legislated to do. And in fact, we have legislated in Florida law who is allowed to vote.
Right.
So I think what's important about that in terms of following the law is that if a felon votes in this election, not in the future, but in this election, their ballot is not counted. An illegal alien, they don't get to determine the future of our nation, our state. The signature blocks on absentee ballots, according to Florida law, must match. If you go to a bank and sign it dually and they don't match, you're not going to be able to cash the check, so that won't be counted.
Right.
So they have to follow the law as it's written. May not like it, but they can change it next year.
Right. A couple of really quick questions. In Bay County, the supervisor of elections is now confirming that over 140 vote-by-mail ballots came into his office either by fax machine or by email. I don't know if that's covered in the state statute, but that's now raising questions.
It will be covered in the state statutes, and so the Panhandle clearly was a different situation because
of the hurricane.
But the idea that they could get all of their reporting correctly and get everything in on time, it puts more of an emphasis on why the others can't.
Now, two quick questions here. Is this a matter of that things like this happen in every state all the time? Sometimes it takes longer than you would suspect to count the actual votes, but it's never really an issue unless it's a very close race.
That's why Florida will always stand out. As I said, we're a purple state. We have two constituencies that are very close in number. So Florida will always be at that pinnacle in deciding races.
And the other question is, as somebody who, you were in the middle of this in 2000, you see the politicization of this right now. Are you concerned that the impact of all of this may be that the public is less confident about our elections, and obviously that's not really good for the entire country?
I hope the public becomes more engaged. I hope they become more involved. I hope they become more educated and understand that the future of this country hinges on their vote, and so they will understand the process better.
All right, Katherine Harris, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Katherine Harris is the former Secretary of State for the state of Florida. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's head over to ABC7's Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan with the first look forecast. Bob.
Thanks, Alan, and get a look at this gorgeous sunset tonight, looking out over Sarasota Bay from our ABC7 tower cam, showing fair skies for the most part, and it looks as though we'll see clear skies overnight. There may be an inland shower or two, but we're not anticipating a lot of rainfall over the next couple of days. Different story, though, as we get into Wednesday and especially Thursday as a cold front moves in. Right now, an area of low pressure is developing over the lower Mississippi Valley right now. This area of low pressure will track basically off to the northeast, but with it, there will be a cold front attached to it, and that cold front is still well back here, and it's not moving all that fast. So we're going to see this eventually slide in, as I said, late Wednesday, and then continue on in through Thursday, cooling us down for Friday and the weekend. But right now, not much rain to show you. We have a little sea breeze action happening with a few spotty showers around, but that activity is well inland. You can see that now through Polk County, also into Hardy County, some showers there, but nothing significant. And it looks like we'll see a few isolated showers inland mainly throughout the remainder of the evening. Currently, it's fair out there. We have 80 degrees still at this hour after a high today was 88. That tied an old record high set back in 2002. The dew point temperature is what we look at to see how warm things will be, and low temperatures expected to be in the low to mid 70s overnight. And yes, the tropical season not over yet. It officially ends November 30th, and we are monitoring an area of disturbed weather east and northeast of the northern Leeward Islands, and that is moving off to the west-northwest. There's a chance, pretty good one, that it could develop into a tropical depression or even a tropical storm over the next several days. We'll have more on that, and Al will be right back after this. Stick around.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
It's year-end clearance time at every Gettle location. Over 3,000 new vehicles, over 1,000 used vehicles on clearance right now at Gettle.com. And Gettle Pre-Owned Certified Plus means buying with peace of mind. Get credit help, fast cash for your car, and year-end clearance prices right now at a Gettle dealership near you. Gettle's got it. At Gettle.com.
There are lots of people who are confused about which Medicare plan is right for them.
Hey, that's me. I barely know where to start.
Well, start here with me, Karen. I'm a licensed Humana sales agent.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Karen. I'm John Smith.
Hi, John. At Humana, we know you're unique, so you have different needs from other John Smiths.
Yeah, I've always thought so.
And together, we can find a plan that's right for you.
Great. I go to the doctor a couple of times a year, and I have some prescriptions, but I'm never fully sure of what's covered and what's not.
With Humana's all-in-one Medicare Advantage plans, you get coverage for hospital stays, doctor visits, and Part D prescription drug benefits, all for an affordable and sometimes no monthly plan premium.
Do you have any more information?
Sure. I'll get a decision guide in the mail to you today. They're free.
Finally, someone who understands the real me.
Your health and happiness is important to us. Call or go online now to get your free decision guide. Call a licensed Humana sales agent today.
Helping families with mesothelioma is all we do. My firm has been offering a free book on mesothelioma for over 10 years. Since that time, hundreds of people with mesothelioma have trusted us to represent them. We have local offices throughout the U.S. and there is no risk to you. Mesothelioma really is all we do. Call us at 1-800-485-6000. That's 1-800-485-6000. Or go to mesoonlylaw.com.
Check out My Suncoast Dining on mysuncoast.com, your guide to the foodie lifestyle. ABC7's own Chef Judy serves up her favorite recipes, cooking tips and trends, dining blogs, step-by-step videos, and Suncoast Restaurant Guide. You'll find it all at mysuncoast.com/dining. Get breaking news alerts focused on the Suncoast. Download the ABC7 News app.
Welcome back. You know, when people say only in Florida, it's stuff like this. Sure, more than a dozen races across the country remain too close to call, including 3 races here. U.S. Senate, Governor, Agriculture, the margin razor thin. A mandatory recount is now underway. ABC's Elizabeth Hur is in New York with the details.
The battle over ballots in full swing across Florida. With ongoing protests outside election headquarters and legal fights brewing inside courtrooms.
What we are asking the court to do today is to remove any doubt.
This emergency hearing in Broward County on Monday ending with the judge saying he sees no evidence of wrongdoing. The two sides in Florida's Senate race have filed lawsuits with just over 12,000 votes separating the current governor, Rick Scott, and Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. The race for governor also tight, just within a half percentage point. That margin triggering an automatic recount for both races, and President Trump tweeting claims of election fraud without evidence.
The evidence is that Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis have won. In fact, Andrew Gillum conceded on the night of the election.
Democrat Andrew Gillum did admit defeat on election night, but he has since rescinded his concession, and his Republican opponent Ron DeSantis is not backing down. Voters in Florida, in the meantime, continue rallying, chanting, all voices need to be heard.
Every vote should count. Every vote should count, regardless.
We want to make sure all ballots are counted legally.
Election workers in Florida have until 3 p.m. this Thursday to complete the recount by machine. Now, if the margin of victory at that time falls under a quarter of a percentage point, then the law calls for a recount by hand. Elizabeth Hur, ABC News, New York.
Coming up next, a Sarasota County Commissioner who survived his own recount and has gone on to monitor other elections, a former state representative, and the best radio talk show host in Tampa Bay. The Trapezoid is next.
There's nothing like this trail in Alabama. It just goes from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state. We see all kind of different terrains, great value, great fun. We've been coming for 18 years. We started off with a group of 8, grew to 12, and grew to 16. And we love it because where else can you get world-class golf courses with world-class accommodations? To be able to play these type of courses in this environment, and the difficulty keeps us coming back over and over and over again.
This is an important message for anyone with Medicare. You may be eligible for an all-in-one Medicare plan that combines hospital, medical, and prescription drug coverage together with extra benefits that may include dental, vision, hearing aids, and much more. Some of these plans have a $0 monthly premium regardless of your income. That's right. For one low plan premium, or in some cases a $0 premium, you may be able to get coverage for your hospital visits, doctor appointments, prescription drugs, routine dental care, eyeglasses and contact lenses, hearing aids, and possibly more. Today may be the first time you've heard about this type of Medicare plan. The advisors at the Medicare.com helpline are licensed insurance agents who will explain more when you call. Call now to see if you qualify. Call the number on your screen now. Call now to see if you qualify for these benefits. You worked hard for your Medicare. Now is the time for your Medicare to work hard for you. Not affiliated with or acting on behalf of any government agency or program.
Introducing the ABC7 First Alert Weather Tracker. This all-new mobile weather lab is just one more way. The team you trust is keeping you ahead of the storms. The ABC7 First Alert Weather Tracker, sponsored by Mr. Sparky, America's on-time electrician.
Growing up, my mom was afraid of the water, something she did not want me to feel.
So I enrolled Missy in swim lessons.
It changed my life.
Missy Franklin.
And now you can do the same for someone that you love.
There's nothing more precious than your child's well-being.
So act now, before it's too late.
Make us fly! I'm glad I did.
Thanks, Mom. Visit usaswimmingfoundation.org to find, get, or give a swim lesson.
Celebrate New Year's Eve at the Van Wezel. Madison's presents the Sweet Caroline Tour, a Neil Diamond concert celebration starring the #1 Neil Diamond performer in the world, Jay White. Proceeds benefit Sarasota's Parkinson Place and the Parkinson Research Foundation in their first ever community fundraiser. Individual tickets and full access VIP packages available now at vanwezel.org. Spaces limited. That's vanwezel.org.
Welcome back. Yes, we have been down this road before, and the last time it was even more on the line. Well, maybe. After all, it was the presidency of the United States, Bush versus Gore, a legal cage match that ultimately was decided by the Supremes, the United States Supreme Court. Now we have social media and real pieces of work like Matt Gaetz, the Panhandle congressman, hanging out in Broward County, telling every camera he could find Democrats are trying to steal the election they can't win. Great job, Congressman, because it's not good enough that you whip up disdain and division in D.C. You're doing your level best to make a bad situation worse here at home by alleging Democrats are trying to steal an election, even when the Florida Secretary of State and Florida Department of Law Enforcement says there's no evidence of actual fraud. Maybe there's more on the line this time, like faith in the pillars of our democracy and public confidence that we can work through it together. Joining us for more is Sarasota County Commissioner Paul Caragiulo, who had an election go to a recount himself, and former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald. And gentlemen, let me start right there because that is our biggest concern. I can understand why this is politicized and both sides are doing their level best. But Commissioner, are you concerned that the rhetoric that we're hearing, maybe on both sides, is having an impact on the public's trust about the elections themselves?
I think ultimately, it's hard to say. You hear these comments that things are it's more divisive than it ever has been. I don't know that that's absolutely true. I think part of the real genius behind our form of government is that you kind of, this is expected. This level of disagreement is to be expected. When it gets to when it gets to the more extreme kind of portion where it kind of turns people off, I think is where I think the risk really is. I'm a person who has enormous faith in the system. I think that there are winners and there are losers, and as long as you can look at a process and it has been followed the way it should be, people are going to be upset and people are going to be elated, and that's what happens.
So I mentioned earlier that there have been some hiccups in both in the actual counting in Broward County, in Palm Beach County. I talked about in Bay County where they had some votes that were faxed in or sent in by email, and even here in Manatee County, they had to start and stop the recount today. Let's listen to the election supervisor, Mike Bennett.
Well, hiccup happens when we program the machines, okay? This is the first time any of us have ever done 3 races. It's the first time ever in the history of Florida anybody's ever done 3 races. And in order to do it, when we program the machines, when we hit the button to lay out what was going to be kicked out, we're supposed to kick out overvotes, undervotes, and blank ballots. And we kicked out the blank ballots and we kicked out the overvotes, but we didn't kick out the undervotes. And so we started back over again and rerunning them all.
So we not only have the heated rhetoric out there, Keith, but we have situations like that where, I mean, things hopefully are coming out just fine in Manatee County, but you hear stories like that.
Okay, well, first, with respect to what Paul said about the system, you have to remember that we're a republic, and the founders thought that they were dependent upon not just sets of procedures, but responsible people. And it's irresponsible and even seditious for political leaders to be suggesting that the people who come out of a legally conducted election are not duly elected and don't deserve their authority. So everybody really needs to step back from that kind of rhetoric. It's dangerous and it's bad for the country, and we are in a period where there's actually escalating political violence. But this is a complicated procedure, and it's all anticipated in the law. There's a reason why, under the law, there are several days between the election night and the certification, because there are lots of steps. And you know, these supervisors are also somewhat underfunded, so they don't always have the capacity to zip through these things in an adequate amount of time.
Well, some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrat, and people, you know, make mistakes, Paul. But you know, you have been involved in these canvasses. When you hear like what we have going on in Manatee County right now, what goes through your mind?
Well, I think that mistakes occur, and when they are recognized and identified, there are procedures, and you work your best to try to work through those. We can't, you know, we're all human beings. Regardless of how much software and computers and all this other stuff, at the end of the day, the system is dependent on human beings. Things happen, and if you admit them and you discover them and admit them frankly, you make the correction per the law. And the law provides for all these types of things when they do occur. So if we're going to be in this mood where we're going to look for every last little sensationalistic, you know, tidbit to exploit, it's not going to get us where we need to, where we'd like to be, frankly.
That's a perfect place to take a pause. Our conversation on the recount in the Florida election continues right after we get the check on the first alert forecast with Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan. Bob.
And everyone voted on this picture as a really nice picture, and no one can disagree with that. Susanna Nokomis looking really good right there. You can see a beautiful sunset that occurred there near Nokomis, and an area of low pressure continues to develop and organize over the lower Mississippi Valley. This is going to track off to the northeast, and then a cold front associated with it will eventually sweep through our area, but it's going to take a while to get here. It'll be Wednesday night, Thursday, and then it'll be through by Thursday evening, which will cool us down. But right now, severe weather is still a potential just to the west of Tallahassee tonight as more storms are developing near that area of low pressure, and there's a little tornado watch still in effect. We've had a few showers, a few brief showers. The sea breeze is already well inland, and you can see some of that activity now blowing up into, looks like, again, Polk County and down into Hardy County, a little bit of light rain showers scattered about. Forecast tomorrow looks to be another warm one. We had a record today, 88 degrees, and we'll see highs into the mid-80s. Now, the low to start things off will be in the low to mid-70s. That's more like August as opposed to here being in November. Now, there is a cool down. We talked about this last week. It was expected to be here on Thursday. Everything's been delayed today. Also, because of that tropical system, it's kind of changing the overall flow pattern up a little bit. So we'll kind of cool down on Friday. That cold front, by the way, that will come through, more than likely will carry that tropical system out into the Atlantic and keep it away from the U.S. So we'll stay in the yellows and reds. That indicates high temperatures in the 80s, it looks like, right in through Wednesday. And then by Friday, things will be starting to cool down. This has an 80% chance developing. It was up to 90 this morning, so it's come down a little bit over the next 5 days. Right now, the winds are still too strong in the upper levels of the atmosphere to allow this to get going, but we do occasionally see a tropical system pop up in the last month of the hurricane season. Once every 4 or 5 years, we'll see something popping up in November, but typically they stay away from the U.S. because there's a lot of fronts usually coming through. This one's moving to the west at 10, and the top winds are now at 35 miles an hour. You can see a majority of the models take it off to the west-northwest and then curve it off into the open waters of the Atlantic, although a couple are now suggesting more into the Caribbean, so that would be very concerning. We'll watch that closely. As far as current conditions go, 80 degrees right now. The humidity is at 79%, so it's still very high. The pressure is actually rising now at 30.02 inches. I mentioned the high. It was 88 today. That tied a record set back in 2002. This morning's low was in the 70s, and that's well above our average. Our normal high at 80 and our normal low at 60 degrees. That's typically pretty nice. Well, this is now through Thursday. By then, the front will be through our area, and we'll start to see that north wind, and that will cool us down on into Friday morning. Friday looks to be pretty nice, low 70s to mid 70s. And then again on Saturday, pretty much a similar. Sunday, maybe a little bit warmer, but still in the 70s, I expect. Temperatures will be quite nice. Looks like right through the weekend, and with that high pressure building in, weekend looks to be pretty nice as well. Already looking forward to the weekend. A light chop on the bays and inland waters. South winds will be at 10 knots, and seas will be right around 2 feet tomorrow. Here's the extended forecast then, near record-breaking tomorrow. And then staying warm on Wednesday, and then Thursday, things start to get back down to normal, high of 79, although we'll see showers and storms around. Cooler weather, as promised, for the weekend. Alan will be back with his guests right after this. Stick around.
All hands on deck. What's up? I want to point out 3 tips for using the home computer more safely. Point away.
First, stop. Make sure your software is up to date and that you've password protected your computer's login and Wi-Fi connection.
Next, think before visiting a site, opening attachments, or clicking on links.
Then connect, knowing you're helping make the web safer for you
and for everyone. Make Stop, Think, Connect part of your daily online routine.
To be able to just get my son here and not think about how we will pay for it, it just takes so much weight off of my family. St. Jude allowed me to focus on being a mom to Bryce. And sometimes I'm just in awe of the impact St. Jude has, not only on this community, but the world.
Don't allow your weight to threaten your health or control your future. Excess weight or obesity can cause emotional and physical health risks. But you can take control. The Your Weight Matters campaign offers free resources and tips to help you measure and understand your weight. Take the Your Weight Matters Challenge. The free toolkit prepares you to speak with a healthcare provider about your weight. Your weight does matter. Take the challenge and take control today.
Once you get atrial fibrillation, you need to have a very close relationship with your primary doctor. Prevention is the whole ball game here, because once you have a stroke, you can't undo it. A year without stroke is a year that you can enjoy doing the things that you've worked all your life to finally get to do. You took care of yourself. You did what is necessary for you to be around one more year. And then next year, we'll celebrate one more year without a stroke.
I'm Deshauna Barber. In 2016, I was proud to win the title of Miss USA. What makes me just as proud is my service in the U.S. military. In the service, a soldier gains skills and learns values like discipline and leadership. That makes them an asset to any business that hires them. If you're an employer, on behalf of Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, remember to hire smart and bet on a vet. Visit saluteheroes.org or call this number to learn more.
This is an important message for anyone with Medicare. You may be eligible for an all-in-one Medicare plan that combines hospital, medical, and prescription drug coverage together with extra benefits that may include dental, vision, hearing aids, and much more. Some of these plans have a $0 monthly premium regardless of your income. That's right. For one low plan premium, or in some cases a $0 premium, you may be able to get coverage for your hospital visits, doctor appointments, prescription drugs, routine dental care, eyeglasses and contact lenses, hearing aids, and possibly more. Today may be the first time you've heard about this type of Medicare plan. The advisors at the Medicare.com helpline are licensed insurance agents who will explain more when you call. Call now to see if you qualify. Call the number on your screen now. Call now to see if you qualify for these benefits. You worked hard for your Medicare. Now is the time for your Medicare to work hard for you. Not affiliated with or acting on behalf of any government agency or program.
Find out first at 4 with ABC7 News at 4. Weekdays on ABC7. You're watching ABC7 News at 7:30.
Welcome back. We are talking about the sequel to the Florida recount. Joining us for more is Sarasota County Commissioner Paul Caragiulo, who had an election go to a recount himself, former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, and joining us by phone is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida. And Dan, let me start with you, and welcome to the broadcast. We were just talking that any election is an imperfect process with imperfect people trying to do the best they can, and we all get that it's important to maintain our confidence in the system. But then you have people, either Matt Gaetz, the congressman, or even the president, who, let's take a look at his tweet. The Florida election should be called in favor of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis in that large numbers of new ballots showed up out of nowhere and many ballots are missing or forged. An honest vote count is no longer possible. Ballots massively infected must go with election night. The president has no evidence that ballots were forged. Does that, in your opinion, undermine public confidence in this election?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, public confidence has been undermined in this election, and it's a product of these zero-sum game that these candidates and that these elected officials and campaigns do, in fact, play. Just this basic idea that, whatever it takes to win, they're going to win. And frankly, at this point in time, it's a pivotal point in time in Florida's election process, because we're going on 3 presidents now that were deemed illegitimate by at least half the country. George W. Bush had it stolen from him by his brother, or had it given to him by his brother Jeb Bush of Florida. Barack Obama was a Kenyan-born individual, so half the country didn't believe he was legitimate. Then you've got Trump, who Russian meddling, half the country believed he was legitimate. And now we funneled it down to statewide elections, where we're going to have half of the Florida public not believe that either DeSantis or Gillum is legitimate, or Scott or Nelson are legitimate. And it's just a very terrible place to be right now in politics, and especially here in Florida.
What do we do about it, Keith? I mean, he really basically nailed it there.
I think we have to ask our public officials to behave a little more responsibly. And by the way, neither Mayor Gillum nor Senator Nelson have said that they would contest the validity of the outcome of this election if we go through the process and make sure that everybody's vote counts to the degree that we're able to do that. So it's not really everybody, it's some people, and we should be willing to name who they are. When President Trump said what he said in his tweet, he's actually demanding that we violate Florida law and the procedures that we have in place that do assure that everyone has the right to vote. That's really what this country's about.
You mentioned Senator Nelson. Let's take a look at what he just said.
Rick Scott isn't interested in making sure every lawful vote is counted. And the second is that he's using his power as governor to try to undermine the voting process. He's thrown around words like voter fraud without any proof.
Paul, I guess that's the central issue here, that there's been a lot of discussion of fraud. There's a lot of discussion of things that look one way and turn out to be another. Down in Broward County, somebody found a case that said provisional ballots, and you had all these people explode about, whose ballots are they being shipped in, and it turns out it was like rulers and tape and pens and pencils and no ballots.
At the end of the day, those who have skin in the game are going to make statements on both sides. At the end of the day, I'm just waiting to see the outcome. I do think that if we follow the process, we'll get to where we need to be. If at that point there are procedures that need to change in order to provide for a better system, then that's what we need to do. I can't speak intelligently on what's going on in Broward County. I don't know what's going on in Broward County. I think there's a lot of things that look very odd. I'm going to be very honest with you. But I can tell you what goes on in Sarasota County. And in my experience, working as a precinct clerk, working on the canvassing board as a public official, I've seen nothing that remotely resembles any impropriety or incompetence. Because frankly, you know, it's a very nebulous thing because we can all assume something nefarious is going on. But at the end of the day, there are folks who are more competent than others, as there is in any other industry or type of work or whatever. Let's let the process play out.
And Dan, I've heard a lot of people say over the past week that, look, it's been 18 years since the 2000 election. If processes needed to be fixed, why is this kind of stuff still happening now? Why haven't we gotten our collective act together in Florida?
Well, because it's government. I mean, we never get our act together when it comes to government. I mean, it basically is one of those things where they always wait till the 11th hour and never really get to a point where they actually fix it because, you know, time heals all wounds, so to speak. And think of it from this standpoint. I mean, are we actually going to figure out who wins this election by the deadline, which is Thursday? As of 5:40 this afternoon, Broward County still hasn't started the recount process of 700,000 ballots. They're not going to reach Thursday's deadline. There's no shot they're going to meet Thursday's deadline. So all they can hope for is a judge to extend the deadline, to step in and make a ruling on it, which isn't good for anybody.
And that raises the question, what happens when these deadlines are not met? Do you just stop and that's the result of where it was? I want to get you both gentlemen commenting on something that Mayor Gillum said about the vote count.
So if you wonder why the President of the United States, the junior senator of the United States, Mr. Rubio, the sitting governor of the state of Florida are fighting like you know what to stop a vote count, that ought to tell you something. That ought to tell you something. Look, God knows how this thing will end up ultimately, but if you've got confidence, if you've got assuredness that the voters of this state chose you, then you would want every single vote to be counted, every one of them.
I get that, Keith, but you know, the distance between DeSantis and Gillum now, although statistically it's very close, it's still 30,000 votes. I don't know if there's any precedent in U.S. history that the recount would flip something like that.
Well, remember, this recount is triggered by virtue of statute. It wasn't requested by any of the candidates. And I'm really with Paul. I think if the procedures are followed as well as they can be, we could end up in a very good place. There is a problem with the law, partly that it doesn't provide enough time to do all the things that need to be done to do those procedures. One last point that's important. There is a superset of rules over and above these processes, the Constitution of the United States, and there will be constitutional issues if Florida decides not to count votes that they have in their possession, because that violates the 14th Amendment.
What do you do with that? What if the counting is not done by the deadline? It's not the fault of the voter.
No, it's not the fault of the voter, but it goes back to sort of what Keith was saying. You know, not all counties are equal. You've got to remember that the process, you have sort of a mix of folks who are professionals. You get a lot of volunteers in the process. There's a training module that has to go on. It's no small thing to put an election on in a small to medium-sized county, let alone a large one. But that being said, is they're really, I really wonder procedurally what has been going on in these, we'll just call these two very large counties, to allow this to kind of manifest itself. I find it a little disturbing.
We have to take a quick break. We're just getting warmed up. Our conversation on the Florida recounts will continue after a quick break, so stay with us.
It's year-end clearance time at every Ghetto location.
selection, over 3,000 new vehicles, over 1,000 used vehicles on clearance right now at Gettle.com. And Gettle Pre-Owned Certified Plus means buying with peace of mind. Get credit help, fast cash for your car, and year-end clearance prices right now at a Gettle dealership near you. Gettle's got it. At Gettle.com.
The following message is brought to you by Mesobook.com.
People who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma have many questions. How did I get this disease? What are my treatment options? How will this affect my loved ones? You need answers, which is why we offer a free book written by medical professionals who have treated mesothelioma.
Call toll-free at 1-800-777-1366 or go to Mesobook.com.
According to a new survey by U.S. News & World Report, 3 of Alabama's top 4 hotels and resorts are part of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail Resort Collection. The Grand Hotel Marriott Resort in Point Clear, the Battle House Renaissance Mobile Hotel and Spa, and the Renaissance Birmingham Ross Bridge Golf Resort and Spa. Hey, we didn't invent Southern hospitality, we just offer more of it. Visit rtjgolf.com/resorts to find out more.
This is an important message for anyone with Medicare. You may be eligible for an all-in-one Medicare plan that combines hospital, medical, and prescription drug coverage together with extra benefits that may include dental, vision, hearing aids, and much more. Some of these plans have a $0 monthly premium regardless of your income. That's right. For one low plan premium, or in some cases a $0 premium, you may be able to get coverage for your hospital visits, doctor appointments, prescription drugs, routine dental care, eyeglasses and contact lenses, hearing aids, and possibly more. Today may be the first time you've heard about this type of Medicare plan. The advisors at the Medicare.com helpline are licensed insurance agents who will explain more when you call. Call now to see if you qualify. Call the number on your screen now. Call now to see if you qualify for these benefits. You worked hard for your Medicare. Now is the time for your Medicare to work hard for you. Not affiliated with or acting on behalf of any government agency or program.
Every time you purchase a fishing license or register your boat, you're helping to preserve our nation's coastlines, lakes, rivers, and streams, protecting memories for generations to come. Learn how your participation in boating and fishing can help the environment at takemefishing.org/conservation.
Welcome back. We are talking about the sequel to the Florida recount, and joining us for more is Sarasota County Commissioner Paul Gargiulo, who had an election go to a recount. Former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, and joining us by phone is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida. And Dan, I'm going to start with you again because even nationally, people are talking about, Rick Hassan wrote, "There's no mincing words. We are entering the dangerous new phase in the voting wars. Last week's various elections calamities were fueled by incendiary and unsupported claims by Trump and others of fraud, by pockets of incompetence in election administration." And it goes on to say that, Americans are more and more going to question the outcome of the elections. And where does this end? Where does this stop?
I don't know where it stops. I mean, I think that we are getting to a tipping point. We're getting to a point where you see people even getting to arriving at this idea of why should I even vote? I mean, especially now. I mean, in my estimation, the Republicans and Governor Scott, the only thing they can do is back down and let the process to continue. Palm Beach Supervisor of Election Butcher said there's no shot that she meets the recount. As I mentioned earlier, Broward hasn't even started the recount process. They're going to have to extend the deadline. All of the eligible votes should, in fact, be counted, and people should be everyone who voted on time and properly should, in fact, be counted. So they're going to have to back down. They're going to have to let the process play itself because we are talking about preserving our democracy at large. And frankly, if anyone leaves this thing thinking that sitting governor and a Senate candidate altered the results or elections or stifled the vote, then why would anyone ever vote again? And it would directly affect the GOP coming out into 2020.
And gentlemen, look, let's be realistic here. In the governor's race, the differential is 30,000 votes. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think there's any precedent for a recount to flip that kind of votes. In the Senate race, it's 12,000. That's minuscule when there's close to 10 million people voting. I think it was like 8 million, but still 12,000 votes in a recount, Paul, is a big obstacle. So therefore, why does Governor Scott go on TV and saying the liberals are trying to steal this election? Isn't there a bigger responsibility here?
Well, I would imagine that's a question for Governor Scott, but perhaps Governor Scott doesn't have the faith in the system.
It's his state.
I don't know. I think it's a little different when you're an active participant. There's a lot at stake here, but I think that 12,000 votes is a pretty significant clip there. And I don't know that the outcome is going to be any different, and that's precisely why we need to go through the process, regardless of what any of the participants are saying. The process must go on as it is written in the law, and then we can decide what, if anything, we're going to do once that comes to term. But before that, I don't think it's reasonable to suggest anyone's going to not comment or not have an opinion, or that's the nature of it.
And Keith, Dan brought up the issue that if people lose confidence, they're going to stop voting. We should be very happy by voter turnout in the midterm elections. It's the highest midterm voting in years, but still you find people out there who say, what's the point, my vote doesn't count, and this storyline doesn't help that.
Yeah, there are two different reasons why people don't vote. One is that they're happy with the status quo, and the other is that they're very unhappy with the status quo. But one of the great things about the design of our institutions is they allow conflict to be settled through the procedures and through the institutions. And that's why I think it's something different by degree that you have public officials saying that our elections don't have integrity. That's dangerous.
Paul. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I can just, I don't, with all due respect, I don't go by what I see in the media. I try not to, get into that vortex, if you will. I can just tell you from my experience, watching very closely in this community, I have complete confidence in our system. Now, why our system is markedly different, perhaps at a competency level, at a regulation level, whatever you want to say, I have no idea. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, I'm concerned with what goes on in my own backyard, and I'm very confident about what goes on here.
All right, we have to take another quick break. We'll be back for final thoughts with our guests in a moment, but right now let's get a final check on our first alert forecast with Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan. Bob.
Thanks. We're watching the sunset again over Sarasota Bay. We saw this earlier. I didn't want to show you again if you missed it earlier. Just a few clouds around. Skies are fair right now. It's going to be warm through Wednesday now. Looks like this cooler air will be delayed by about a day. And then we'll see a good chance for rainfall to move in. That'll be mainly on Thursday, but I think even before that, Wednesday night, there's a good chance for some showers and some storms in advance of the cold front. The cold front really doesn't work through until midday on Thursday, and then we start to cool down as those winds shift mainly to the north. And that will usher in some cooler temperatures for Thursday night, Friday, and into Saturday, and even into Sunday. Things will be pretty mild around town as a result of some drier and cooler air. Just a little sliver still left for the possibility of tornadoes over the panhandle of Florida. It is snowing now near Chicago, South Bend, all the way up into looks like northeast Indiana near Fort Wayne, and some snow showers as well near St. Louis tonight. That frontal boundary is still well back to the west and north of it. It's going to take its time getting to us. It won't be here, as I mentioned, until Thursday before it gets on through. Now for us, a few spotty showers along the sea breeze front. Some activity starting to flare up there just south of Interstate 4 into Polk County. Not much going on here. As I mentioned, one or two inland showers not out of the question. So let's look at the low temperatures tomorrow to start things off. They'll be into the low 70s, which is typical for August and September. And then we'll warm up into the mid 80s for highs tomorrow. And then tomorrow night, another warm one expected. So we'll start off on Wednesday, once again in the low 70s up and down the coast. A bit cooler over the panhandle. You'll start to see some of those cooler temperatures on Wednesday moving in there. But unfortunately, we're going to get near record-breaking highs on Wednesday as well. Excuse me, 87 degrees, the expected high on Wednesday. Cooler, be close to seasonal averages on Thursday with highs right around 80 degrees due to an increased cloud cover. And then notice the difference on Friday. Well, this system is, there's an area of low pressure. There's definitely a circulation here. There's not a lot of deep convection developing near it at this point. There's still some shear, and looks like it has a chance, potential, as I mentioned earlier, of developing into a tropical depression or tropical storm. If it does become a storm, the next name up is Patty. That's the next name storm. And it has been a fairly active hurricane season for 2018 with 15 named storms, 8 of those hurricanes and 2 major hurricanes at this point. It officially ends November 30th. Right now it's 80 and the pressure 30.02 inches. The dew point's way up there. And as far as the high goes today, I mentioned it earlier, 88 degrees. That is a record, at least tied a record set back in 2002. And we are looking for north winds. This is Thursday. The snow falling as far south as Tennessee and North Carolina, but that wind will be out of the north throughout the afternoon and evening on Thursday, which will indeed cool us off. For boaters tomorrow, winds out of the south at 10 knots, and seas will be right around 2 feet or less. There'll be a light chop out there. The extended forecast then calling for a 20% chance for a shower on Tuesday, much better chances for late day storms on Wednesday, and then even more on Thursday. Cooler for the weekend, low to mid 70s expected. Alan will be right back after this.
Want to know a secret? If you're looking for the best selection of area rugs at an unbelievable price, the only place you need to look is Rugs is Art. I know what you're thinking. Expensive, right? Wrong. Rugs is Art has the largest selection of area rugs on the west coast of Florida in a variety of styles, with 8x11 area rugs starting at $199. Largest selection, personalized service, and unbelievably low prices. You'll find it all at Rugs is Art.
Rugs as Art, Sarasota's only area rug superstore.
Well, Thomas, you've got prediabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
Each day, researchers make discoveries that bring us closer to the moment when all cancer patients can become survivors. Their progress is made possible with the help of clinical trials. Clinical trials are the brightest torch researchers have to light their way towards better treatments. And if you've been diagnosed with cancer, they may be your brightest ray of hope. Speak with your doctor and visit standuptocancer.org/clinical trials to learn more. Together, we can stand up for all of us.
I'll be right back.
Check out My Suncoast Dining on mysuncoast.com, your guide to the foodie lifestyle. ABC7's own Chef Judy serves up her favorite recipes, cooking tips and trends, dining blogs, step-by-step videos, and Suncoast Restaurant Guide. You'll find it all at mysuncoast.com/dining. Download the all-new ABC7 First Alert Weather app now.
And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts, and I'm going to start with Dan Maduri because, I've heard everything you've said over the last hour, Dan, but what are your listeners saying to you?
They think that whatever the outcome, there's going to be half of the state that's completely and utterly not satisfied with the election results, and that they don't think that there's any confidence that can be instilled upon them to show that this election wasn't just absolutely drenched in incompetence. And I keep saying, it's kind of one of those things where there's been a running inside joke within the political circle that, we got to see what Broward does. And I've been hearing that joke since 2010. And, of course, Dr. Brenda Snipes has been the supervisor of election down there since 2003. So her incompetence is known just throughout the entire state of Florida. So it's almost somewhat reassuring that it is her in her department that's overseeing this, because you kind of sit there and say, okay, it's just whatever it is, there's an issue there, but she's not trying to do anything more nefarious. She's not trying to steal an election, hijack an election. She just, for whatever reason, has not been able to put it all together down there. So there's still a reassurance that you're going to get legitimate numbers, just probably not at the speed you wanted.
Well, if that's the case, Keith, then there are two issues here. I mean, Governor Scott, prior to this, could have done something about that. But on the other hand, she is continually reelected. That's basically on the voters down there, just like voters in their wisdom just reelected 2 members of the United States Congress who are under federal indictment. Sometimes, we got to take responsibility as a public.
Right, and I said earlier our political leaders need to be responsible, and that was a key assumption of the way our republic was designed. People have to be, citizens have to be responsible as well. So this is not a big secret that there have been some problems in that particular county. Another thing we have to do is try to go through the law and figure out ways to make sure that everybody can have their vote counted. That means doing away with gerrymandering and all kinds of other practices that make it hard for people to vote.
Well, let me ask you this, Paul. What systemic change, and we only have a couple of seconds left, do you think it's most important to make after seeing what's happening here?
I think the thing that's most important is to determine if someone is a qualified elector and if their vote should count. I mean, all votes should count. All valid votes should count. All votes by qualified electors should count. That's a far cry from every vote counting, because throughout the system there are votes that are just not going to meet the criteria of a qualified elector. So I know it sounds great. We all get into these buzz phrases about every vote should count. I want to take it further and say we have to make sure that it is a qualified elector in the right place at the right time marking that ballot.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We want to thank our guests, Sarasota County Commissioner Paul Caragiulo, former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, and joining us by phone is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida. That's all the time we have for this evening. I'm Alan Cohn. Thanks for joining us and have a great night.